Hi there and welcome. In this video we will explore how we can build and run subqueries using DBIx. There are two ways how we can run subqueries using DBIx. One is by running raw SQL, as we have explored in the previous lectures, by providing a reference to the SQL we want to run, a string reference, aka scalar ref, or array reference if we want to use additional placeholders. Or the alternative, as we will explore in a bit, where we construct a subquery using the target table result set, converting it to SQL via asQuery method. Let's start by having a refresher of the raw SQL approach using subquery that we would like to replicate in DBIx. Before we begin, let's see what kind of data do we want to fetch. Now currently we have a bunch of nodes in a database, and let's say we want to get all the nodes which have been created by user with ID 27 and let's say user ID 28. And if we see the user table, we're going to see that currently the username for ID 27 is bulk1 and for username bulk2 the ID is 28. Now let's do that. Let's fetch all the nodes where the username is bulk1 or bulk2. Let's see how we can do that using the raw SQL version. Now let's do my results, because we know we're going to get back node results. We use schema. We say that we want to access a result set, which is going to be nodes in our case. Now from there, we want to search result set method, because we know we want to search all the nodes, where the user ID is going to match specific user IDs based on a username table. So here we can provide user underscore ID, and then we can use in keyword. Now, as we have seen before, since we're using placeholders, we can use array ref reference, and then we provide our SQL. Now in this case, this is going to be, we want to select ID from user where username in this case, we know we're selecting two users, so we provide two placeholders. And the values we want to provide is bulk1 and bulk2. Alright, so that looks good. We're accessing the nodes result set. We are looking for user ID using the in keyword, where we have a subquery using raw SQL, where we're selecting ID from the user table, where the username matches either bulk1 or bulk2. So now we fetch all the results, and after that we can just say on the current context the description, and we want to go through all the results that we're getting back. Alright, let's save that. Let's go to the terminal and do Perl -i to include the library, and then we run the script. And let's see what we're getting back. So getting back 4 nodes, but of course it will be more beneficial if we also add dbIx trace. So dbIx underscore trace equals 1. We run this, and we're selecting all the data from the node table, where the user ID, and we have our subquery using the raw SQL. Right, so that's pretty straightforward. We already have used raw SQL before. Now the problem with using raw SQL is that you need to be repetitive, and you're kind of avoiding the whole point of using DBIx if you're writing a lot of raw SQL. So let's see how we can replace this in statement using DBIx and calling asQuery method. So let's comment this out, and let's replicate this using DBIx. So as before, we want to use in keyword, but instead of now writing the raw SQL, we can access a result set and filter that specific result set with the same parameters as we used for the raw query. So we can say schema, and then we want to access the result set, which is going to be our result set user. Now we also want to filter this result set, so we use the search result set method, so search underscore result set. And here we can provide the conditions that we want to filter on. And we know that we already want to filter on the username, and the username has to be in 2 values. And these 2 values are going to be bulk1 and bulk2. Alright, so this is the base SQL, and that's pretty straightforward. Now how do we convert from result set into actual query? Now as I mentioned before, we can use this method called as_query. Now this is going to take our result set and convert it to the raw query based on a specification that as we have written it. And let's run it now, and I can already tell you that this is going to fail for one specific reason. So we see the error as we expected, and if we look at the error message, we're going to see that statement execution failed, operand should contain 1 column. And that makes sense. If you look at the subquery now that we wrote, we're saying that we want to select all from the node where user ID in, and then we're selecting all the columns. But what we want to do, we want to select only the ID column, right? Because the in needs to accept a single column. So how we can do that, we have already seen before. So if we just slightly align this for the first conditions, we can use the second anonymous hashref to provide filter conditions. And here we can say that we want to only select specific columns. And in this case, we want to select the user ID. All right, so if we save this, rerun the query, we're going to see that this works exactly as it did before. A quick alternative here, you don't necessarily need to use columns. Using columns is fine, but you can also use a method on the result set, which is called getColumn. Right, so you only want to access one column, so it also makes sense that you're calling this method, because this is exactly what it does. It returns one column, and we're only interested in the ID from the user table. So if you rerun this, and we're going to see that it works exactly as it did before. We're selecting everything from the nodes, where the user ID equals from the results that we got in the subquery. Now there can be times where you have the same column names as your primary table and the subquery table you're currently looking at, and you want to be very explicit of which column you're selecting. For example, we're currently looking at the user ID for the in condition, but let's say we also wanted to look at the user column such as type. So we want to get all the nodes for users where the username equals bulk1 or bulk2, but we only want to consider those items where the type is admin. Now the type column is not currently clashing, but it's good practice to actually alias your subqueries. What I mean by that is, if we uncomment this out, now let's remove the columns, and let's replace it with alias, and we can call it whatever you want. I'm going to choose inner_sq for subquery. Let's save that, and now what I can do here, I can reference this inner subquery as inner_sq and then the column name. So I want to say that I only want all the results where also type equals admin. So if we save this, rerun the script, we're going to see that now we are selecting all the nodes where the username as before equals bulk1 or bulk2, but we are also adding additional conditions where we're saying or alias subquery, which is inner_sq, type equals admin. And this aliasing, of course, is needed because by default, DBIx references the tables as me alias and can be very ambiguous which column you're trying to select. So saying something like me type or just the type without the prefix can introduce quite a bit of ambiguity. So long story short, let's always alias or subqueries to make things more explicit. And you're not limited to only specifying the columns from the inner subquery. You can also extend the conditions where you say, I want my subquery column value to equal a value of the outer query. Now currently we don't have an example where we have two foreign keys on the nodes and user tables that we would need to join to filter results even further. But for sake of example, what we can do, we can say for inner query, which is aliased as inner_sq, we can say that for this column, such as ID, so that's the user ID, we want the outer query to equal, so we use anonymous href equals sign, and then we use backslash and reference to a string. And here we can reference me, which now becomes the outer query node table. And we know that on nodes we have user_ID. If we save this, run the script, we're now going to see the same conditions as before when we're selecting the usernames. But what we also see now is that we are saying we want our inner SQL, aliased as inner_sq, ID, which is the user ID, to equal the outer query, me, which is the node table, user ID. I understand if it can get a little bit more complicated as we go through these videos, but basically all we're doing is that we're just aliasing our inner SQL and then specifying additional parameters that we want to filter on. And also the core takeaway here is we can reference our outer SQL, which would be our node table, by using the me keyword. Alright, so that's it for this video. We looked at how we can construct subqueries using DBIx by using raw SQL, or much cleaner and preferred way if you're using result sets and then calling the asQuery method. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.